you know what I said, but if not, I'm going to say it again. So thanks for this opportunity. I'll be the moderator. We have a nice session. It'll be about an hour and a half. I'm zooming in from my office in Sitka. So I'm going to do the land acknowledgement we do here in Sitka. But as I'm doing that, just think about the first Alaskans in the area where you are. So I'll start by recognizing the Tlingit people who called this place home for over 10,000 years. I want to say thank you for being such wonderful stewards of this special place, and just want to start by acknowledging the first Alaskans. So I'm going to do a quick story that involves some people on the line to kind of frame this conversation, which is about really working together and how if we can pull together our ideas and our resources and we could form a coalition, we're going to get a lot more done locally and in our state. And so you're going to see a variety of speakers. We have a really nice mix of folks who are going to speak. We have Julius from the Department of Transportation, and then Karen from the League of American Cyclists, and we'll have Dawn, public health nurse, and then finally Devora from Bike Anchorage. And then after that, we're going to have an interactive piece, and we're going to use this tool called Menti. And so Julius is, if you wouldn't mind putting it into the chat now. This is so that we can make a word cloud and we can get your ideas. There's going to be 2 questions at the end of the session. And one of them is going to be about the benefits of an active transportation coalition. And then the other one is a polling question. And we're interested to get your feedback on what you think would be a good thing to focus on as we move forward as a state. So the interactive piece will be at the end. But if you look at the chat box, you can see that's where you can open that up. Julius, is there anything you need to share on this Menti before we jump into the next part?
No, I don't think so. For those who haven't used it, it's sort of like a collaborative tool to get real life, data and Mentimeter essentially. So and it's fairly simple. So just open it up in your web browser and put in menti.com, and then the password as well. So have your phone or have a web browser available when we start this.
Thank you, Julius. So that'll be at the end. It will get interactive, but first we're going to start with some presentations. I'm just going to do a short story, and it starts with Lee Hart in June of 2018 at the first Alaska Walk Bike Conference here in Sitka. So it's a week-long conference, and we had someone with the league come up and do classes, and we had different events. And one of them was that Thursday night we had an event. It was called Bike and Bites. It was at a local restaurant. Lee came, and there was a crowd, probably about 15, 20 people. And she talked about how when you build trails, you can build community. You can actually have this turn into something that is great for locals and visitors in the state, and got people excited. And from that, a small group of people started meeting and talking and mapping things out. And they made a plan of where we could actually build some trails here in Sitka, some single track trails. And then took that to the city and got an MOU, got a memorandum of agreement, and started building in the pandemic. And the first trail started in April, and so it was small groups, but it was, the ribbon was cut on June 1st, and it was a small single track trail that went off of our cross trail, which is a multi-use trail. And so all this was done in partnership with Sitka Trailworks, and their director, Lynn, is on the phone too. So we did that first, and we did a second one, and a third one, and a fourth one. And now with the CARES money that came, there's a group now that's doing a fifth one as we speak. So even though it's getting colder, there's a fifth one being built. And so it all is about collaboration and working together and dominoes. And so Lee's talk was kind of that first domino, and it got people excited. And then it went to a group of people who said, yeah, let's do this. And then they made a plan to the city, partnering with Sitka Trailworks. And now there's a lot of great places to ride. In fact, today is getting nice. I may go out and ride after this. So working together, working in partnership is really where it's at. And throughout this process that started at the statewide conference, it was getting ideas from across the state. When we did the MOU with the city, is actually our municipal attorney talking to folks in Anchorage and patterning after that. So I think throughout this, you may see some themes of we can work better together. So let's jump into our first speaker, and I think Julius has some slides to share. So this is Julius Adelson, and he is with the Department of Transportation. He's our state walk and bike coordinator, and so we're thrilled to have him here working for everybody in our state. So if you have a little clap icon, you can do that. But if not, let's turn it over to Julius for our first presentation. Julius.
Thank you so much, Doug, and thank you so much, Lee, for having me. Can you guys see my presentation? All right.
Yes. Yep. Looks good.
Great. So I recently started as the bike and ped coordinator with Alaska DOT. I'm also working part-time. I have two hats. I'm a statewide bike and ped coordinator, but I'm also a rural transit planner as well. So thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm very, very excited to talk about this this topic and the Alaska Statewide Active Transportation Plan. I would like to, this presentation sort of incorporates a little background on the plan, also what type of goals that are in the plan essentially, and future steps of and recommendations of the plan. So I hope to be able to discuss those. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to drop them in the chat box. I will get to them as soon as I can, or send me a private message here on Zoom. All right, so a short background on the plan. It was created in response to the following external and internal needs and actions. There was a general need for a plan update. The previous plan was published in 1995, and as you all know, there have been a lot of things happening in the past 25 years. There was also a realization that the plan that there are an increasing amount of people using non-motorized facilities as well, coupled with a unmet need for safe streets. And when the plan was sort of initiated a couple of years ahead of or before 2019, Alaska topped the list for number of fatalities per 10,000 commuters. So there's definitely a need for safer streets. As Lee has alluded to, and as we've heard in some of the other sessions, at Confluence, non-motorized facilities and networks are also key in our outdoor economy, and also attracting tourists to the state. And internally, there was a need to create a document that focused on safer people and safer streets. That was an initiative initiated by the U.S. DOT Secretary Anthony Fox. So the vision of the Alaska Statewide Active Transportation Plan is that people in Alaska will enjoy equitable, accessible, safer walking and bicycling opportunities as an integral part of daily life. So as we already touched on, there's been an increasing level of interest in bicycling and walking statewide, both as a mode of transportation and as an opportunity for recreation. And DOT and PF have been a proponent in providing space for active transportation within our right-of-ways. And we will also support numerous programs that encourage more people to walk and bicycle to school and work. So the goal of the Alaska State first Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan was to promote the increased use and safety of bicycling and walking as a year-round transportation choices by giving them full consideration in the planning, design, construction, and maintenance of transportation facilities. So in short, the Alaska Statewide Active Transportation Plan will address current conditions and future changes and set out a policy framework to foster a transportation system that meets the current and future needs of walkers and bicyclists across Alaska. And you can see a little bit how it fits in with the other modal plans that we have, both aviation internally in DOT, that is, aviation, active transportation, freight, highway safety, and so on. The plan also had numerous goals and recommendations. Goal area number 1 is safety, followed by health, maintenance, connectivity, and economic development. And these goals and recommendations were also part of a public involvement process, or the outcomes of a public involvement process. And whereas they identified goal areas, activities, and performance measures to deliver the Alaska statewide active transportation's vision, guide transportation decisions, and ensure the effectiveness of transportation investments over the 20-year life of the Alaska statewide active transportation plan. So I just briefly wanted to show these goals and recommendations here, because we'll be coming back to them. These are the highest ranked goals and recommendations that are in the plan. But I want you to sort of just see that they're in the plan, and our role as in DOT and PF is to support the implementation of these recommendations. So next steps. What are the next steps? And to be true to my Department of Transportation sort of role, I have included a quote here by Henry Ford, where it says, "Coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success." So, and I think you'll probably hear this from some of the other speakers today as well, that my 2 cents to get the statewide active transportation plan off the shelf and onto the streets is that we need to work together. There's a huge need. I can't do this by myself at DOT. I have multiple colleagues working on this that are interested, but we also need you, the public, to be engaged in this as well. And there's a need for a unison voice regarding the statewide active transportation issues as well. So my final sort of question that I would like to send you off with before I end my presentation is, what would this unison voice perhaps look like? And I want you to continue to think about this when we all sort of present here and come back to it. We'll come back to it in the end of all these presentations. So with that, I would like to conclude my sort of crash course in the active transportation plan and hand it over to Karen Whitaker with the League of American Bicyclists.
Thanks, Julius. Hi, everyone. I wish I had the opportunity to visit you in person. One second. Let's see if this works. It's gonna take me a second to see my busy screen. My slides up, there you go. So I'm with the League of American Bicyclists, and I do government relations there, which means I spend most of my time lobbying Congress to get more funding for biking and walking and more bicycle-friendly policies. So today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about where Congress is on those issues, and then how advocacy can play a role. So just a quick explanation of how a transportation bill works. On the Senate side, it takes 4 committees to write different pieces of the bill. Once all 4 of those are done, the Senate passes a bill. On the House side, it's only 2 committees, and then it goes to the House. Once they pass a bill, then members of the Senate and members of the House have to sit down together and come up with a compromise. And that's usually what takes all the time. After that, Congress votes on it again, President signs it, and we've got new transportation policy. Over the last 2 years, the House was able to do its job and get through their bill. The Senate did the roads and highways section, but didn't finish the rest. I think they might have if it wasn't for COVID. But they did write the road and highway section, which is where most of the things we care about in terms of biking and walking are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's in there. Another way to think about what they do is that we have a highway trust fund. It's basically a bank account for transportation. That's where the federal gas tax funding goes. There's a couple other taxes that go into that. And then Congress gets to decide how to spend that money. They decide how much is going to go into each program, and they decide what the rules are for each of those programs. Once they've decided that, that money goes down to the states. Each state gets an amount based on their population and miles of roads and a few other things. And there is some money that goes to local governments. One of the things that's different about the transportation bill is because we have that highway trust fund, or we have that bank account and that dedicated funding coming from gas tax, the bill only comes up every 5 or 6 years. The current bill we're under right now, it's called the FAST Act. It expired in September, but Congress renewed it for another year, extended it for another year. So now they basically have a year to finish the transportation bill. Also just want to point out, with biking and walking, we often talk about transportation alternatives. That's a really important funding source for us. And it's important for us because when we look at where the federal funding for active transportation comes from, basically 50% comes from that one program, Transportation Alternatives. We at the League often push for funding to go down to the local level because that's our second biggest pot of money. Congestion mitigation and air quality. Rec Trails is a small program, but it all goes to biking and walking, so we care a lot about that. But then safety, we only get a little bit. So from the League's perspective, going into the next transportation bill, we want to focus on strengthening transportation alternatives, making it as effective as possible, as much funding as possible. We also want to focus on safety because as it's your number one goal, it's a number one goal for a lot of people around the country. And we want to understand why we're getting so little. When we look at biking and walking in terms of safety, nationally, we make up 12% of the trips. Nationally, we make up 20% of the fatalities, but we only get 2% of the funding. When we look at Alaska, your trip number is higher than 12 because just your commutes, just your work commutes are 12%. Your traffic fatalities, bicyclists and pedestrians make up between 18 and 19% of your overall traffic fatalities. But the funding that's coming from your highway safety program, it's less than 1%. And so that's what we wanted to address. So as I mentioned, the Senate did their highway and road section, the House did their bill. So when it came to transportation alternatives, there were a couple things we really wanted to focus on. One was increase funding. The other was make it easier for local communities to use that funding. Right now, if you want to build a project, 80% of that can come from the federal dollars, but the local government needs to put in 20%. And sometimes that's a barrier, particularly for low income or rural communities. So we were able to get to make both of those goals in both the Senate and the House. The numbers are a little different because the House bill overall had a lot more money, but we got more funding, made it easier for states to help local communities meet that local match. Recreational trails program. We wanted two things. We wanted to increase the funding, and then the funding for the rec trails program comes from gas revenue from like snowmobiles and ATVs. And the funding hasn't grown since actually 2009. And part of that is because it's been decoupled. We don't know really now how much is spent on the vehicle fuels. So the idea was we wanted a study to know how much money those fuels were bringing in and an increase in funding as well. What happened there was the Senate gave the study, the House gave the increase in funding. That's helpful, but it's really hard when you get to that conference committee to get both of the things you want. So that's a place we need to continue working. On the safety front, what we wanted to say is that if you as a state have areas that have a high level of biking and walking fatalities, then you should spend some of your safety money on biking and walking safety in those areas. And we got 2 different plans, but in general, that is included. And then for federal lands, we were really trying to get a set aside for biking and walking. We didn't get that, but since that's important for Alaska, I just wanted to let you know, we saw significant increases to federal and tribal lands in both bills. So what this tells me, if we had gotten a bill this year, we would have gotten what we wanted on transportation alternatives. We would have gotten what we wanted on safety. We would have seen an increase in the federal and tribal lands. But the Rec Trails program, it's unclear if we would have done that. We're hoping that we'll get those wins in the next bill, but we'll have to continue pushing for it. And we were able to get these things, not just because of the work we're doing in DC, but because of all the advocacy and help we've gotten from people around the country. Just want to mention a couple other policy changes. Both the House and the Senate bill had some climate programs on resiliency. So making sure that the infrastructure we have now could withstand natural disasters, a plan to reduce emissions in carbon, and then incentive programs for communities and states to do more of that kind of work. The funding's completely different in the 2 bills, but we will probably never see a transportation bill again that doesn't have a climate title, a climate section of it. Complete streets, we got a little bit in each. The Senate gave additional funding for the planning stage. What the House did was write stricter instructions for states when they're building roads to make sure that they're building complete streets. And finally, I just want to mention one other thing. This is only in the House bill, but they created a new performance measure that said, first you have to measure access or connectivity. You talked about connectivity in your state plan. They talk about access in terms of how easy is it to get from your home to daily destinations, school, work, grocery shopping, that kind of thing. And the state would have to measure that across all different modes and then improve on that. They'd have to set a goal for improving on that. Again, that's only in the House bill. So that one's not for sure that it would happen. But overall, it was a pretty good bill for biking and walking. Unfortunately, they didn't finish. We're hoping that we can use this as a base next time and move forward. I just want to say a quick word about your congressional delegation. When I think about, first of all, I'll just say Representative Don Young is a senior member of the Transportation Committee, so he has a really important role. Senator Dan Sullivan is on 2 transportation committees. And when I have a vote coming up and I'm thinking about who we need to lobby, I put members of Congress on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being they're our champs, we never have to worry about them, 5 being they're opposed to us, we're never going to move them. I'd say your delegation is all in the middle, and they all respond to activism, and so it's always important to advocate with them. And I want to tell a story about Dan Sullivan before, because he's someone who never really, his office, I should say, never really responded to our federal work, but did respond to help from input from Alaskans. But I also want to talk about what happens once the money gets to Alaska. So at the League of American Bicyclists, we rank states in terms of their bike friendliness. Alaska is 39th, not the worst, but there's definitely room to improve. There's 5 top actions that we talk about. Having that statewide plan done is really important. That's going to help a lot, and it's going to give that direction. The state has already done work in emphasizing safety or biking as a key safety area that I need to work on. I want to talk about making sure that you get the 2% of federal funds spent on biking and walking. When we look at how all the states have spent the federal money towards biking and walking, this is all of them together, but you generally see that slope up. There's been more funding available on biking and walking, and most states show something similar to this. The big spike in 2009, 2010 was the stimulus back in 2009. You often see a dip when you get a new bill, like you see here in 2013 or 2005, 2006, because the rules change. And And it usually takes the state DOT a little while to get their systems up and running. This is what Alaska looks like. And so it's almost a little bit of a downward slope. And I don't know why. I think some other folks on the call may know. It may be some policy considerations, some rules put in by your state legislature, something the DOT is doing. I don't know. But one thing I think advocacy can do in that role is try to figure that out and then try to understand sort of what a solution could be and work on getting your elected officials to help with that. And just one example, one thing we hear a lot is that like our city, our town, our state, we just don't have the political will to spend that kind of money there. Maybe our engineers, they just don't care. They just don't have the will to do it. One thing I'll say is that elected officials, they never just organically grow that political will. They will respond to it. It's up to us as advocates, as people in the community to build that will. And I talked about Dan Sullivan a little bit earlier. Like I said, I wasn't having a lot of luck with him, but I think it was Bike Anchorage, came to the National Bike Summit, had a meeting with his office in Anchorage. And there was a confirmation hearing for someone high up in the US Department of Transportation dealing with safety. And he was on them. He was on them talking about Vision Zero, the need to address safety for bicyclists and pedestrians. So just wanted to put out there the role that advocacy can play in moving both your state funding, but also the role of Alaska in national funding. So that's, so thanks again for having me. I would love some time to come up and get to be there in person. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Karen. That's a lot of helpful information. I'm sure everybody picked up some new things. And if you have questions for either of our first two, Karen or Julius, you can send them a private message, and then we're going to have some question and answers at the end. So thanks, Karen. Next up, we're going to have Dawn Groth, who is a public health nurse. And right now she's working in active transportation to everyday destination. She's also the co-coordinator for the first, second, and soon to be third Alaska Walk and Bike Conference. And as an added bonus for being on this call, this very hat will be given to someone who signs up for the next Alaska Walk Bike Conference as we come together virtually or in person to make our state healthier and better. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Dawn for her presentation. Dawn?
Hi there, everyone. Can people see my screen, my slides at this point?
Right now we just see you. We see the picture of you.
Okay, hold on here.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, I'm getting there. Hold on.
I'll show the picture of the hat while we're waiting.
Okay.
This is going to be somebody's hat to come to Dawn's conference. Yeah, we can see it. It's looking good.
Okay, not if you can see. Oh, this is why I'm glad I don't have a camera sometimes. Well, Doug, Lee, Karen, I'm telling you, nothing makes my heart beat as someone speaking about money and active transportation. Thank you so much. And thank you, Lee, for this conference. I can't tell you how much money I have spent on visiting other states on bicycle tours, and I've always wished for a bicycle tour in Alaska. I go to these bicycle tours, and there's upwards to 500 people going on these week-long bicycle tours, and I've always wondered, when is Alaska going to have something like this? And I think this is kind of like the where it's all going to start. Making Alaska more bicycle friendly is definitely where it's going to happen. So. Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Dawn Groth, and I'm with the State of Alaska Physical Activity and Nutrition Unit. And our goal in our unit is for Alaskans to eat healthy and have a level of physical activity that reduces chronic diseases And you know the chronic diseases that we speak of are such diseases that can last decades and disable people and cost a lot of money. And we're talking about heart disease, diabetes, and some cancers. And I always like to add that I work physical activity, so I'm activity-friendly routes to everyday destinations. And the other part of my job is breastfeeding outcomes. So I also work on improving breastfeeding outcomes. And I just love the fact that I can tell people behind the scenes that I work on those two topics, because oftentimes people don't understand the connection, but both of them reduce chronic diseases. So my job in the next 10 minutes is to help you realize that public health is really interested in active transportation because physical activity can lead to improved health. And my work cannot be effective unless we have a huge voice of Alaskans speaking up for active transportation, which is what I think a bicycle pedestrian coalition could do. And we're going to hear about the Anchorage Bike Coalition and their advocacy, and hear of all the great things that they've been able to accomplish once they had that unified voice. Before I go much further, I want to introduce from CDC an initiative that kind of guides my work and provides a lot of support. And this, what you see on the screen right there, is called Active People, Healthy Nations. And the goal of this initiative is to help 27 million Americans become more physically active by 2027. And the people in my unit are working on our share of that 27 million right here in Alaska. So a quick overview before we go too much further. When I use the word public health, I want you to understand that in public health, we are interested in the population health. We want all people to meet the physical activity recommendations for good health and to be disease-free. And to be really simplistic, we want 100% of Alaskans to meet the physical activity recommendations for good health through, and this is accomplished through extensive research showing that 150 minutes a week for adults and 60 minutes a day for every kid will help people reach the physical activity guidelines recommended to reduce chronic diseases. And I think that years ago, you used to hear people, public health people, talk about getting out and exercising, running and biking, and exercise. And what we have realized through piles and piles of data as well is that it doesn't work to tell people to go exercise. It doesn't work to tell people to eat their fruits and vegetables. It doesn't work to tell people to not consume sugar-sweetened beverages. What really works are policies put in place to make it easy for us to do the right thing, to do the activity or behavior that is healthy. And our priority, of course, are populations with the worst health outcomes. So you'll hear oftentimes public health speaking about populations that have poor outcomes, and we're working specifically to try to reverse those. Let's see, excuse me. So we know that physical activity improves the quality of life. And again, this document, Physical Activity Guidelines for Americans, piles and piles of research again, that physical activity reduces the chance of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, some cancers, and weight gain. What we say about weight gain is that the weight gain that can lead to musculoskeletal injuries, whether it be hips or knee problems. Depression reduces chances of depression, and it has immediate benefits such as reducing your stress and anxiety, less daytime sleepiness, better nighttime sleep, and of course, healthier blood pressure and blood glucose levels. That being said, unfortunately, in the last 12 years, we have tested or surveyed populations, both youth and adults, to find out what their physical activity levels are currently. And you'll see right here that less than 20% of Alaska youth report they are meeting the daily physical activity guidelines. And like I say, that number really hasn't shifted in over a decade. And less than 60% of adults report, and I want to say report, they are meeting the daily physical activity levels of 150 minutes of moderate physical activity per week. That being said, there is just, like I say, a ton of research showing that physical activity increases when everyday destinations are connected by an activity-friendly route. Here, this is a really busy slide, but it's really simple if we just take a second with it. So at the top, there are examples of destinations such as store, library, school, home, and parks that are connected by safe sidewalks, separated crossings, bus route, urban single track, ski trails for Alaska, road shoulders, safe road shoulders, I'll say, school routes, boardwalks, and even dog sled routes here in Alaska. We know that when these two entities are combined, there is significant evidence that population physical activity increases. Everything, like I said earlier, everything that we do in public health has to be evidence-based, and we have to assess population data to determine strategies that will impact our outcomes. And when we talk about population data, then we turn that lens to the outcomes, and we work on population strategies as well. So this guide that we're taking a look at right now, it's actually really shocking how closely, Julius, it resembles your Alaska statewide active transportation plan. It's as if the two were side by side when they were being created, because they are the same. They are saying the same thing over and over again. Activity-friendly routes to everyday destinations create safer physical activity. In the guide, the strategies that we are concentrate on that provide the most bang for the buck in increasing physical activity are activity-friendly routes to everyday destinations. And we work on those strategies through policies that are listed here and highlighted in yellow. Complete street policies, and I think most everyone here understands the complete street policies are policies that take into consideration bicyclists, pedestrians, motorists, and even persons who have disabilities. And we work on those strategies through policies, such as the complete streets, zoning policies, comprehensive master plans, such as the Alaska statewide active transportation plans, and of course, the safe routes to schools or the safe routes to parks in order to create a network of activity-friendly routes to everyday destinations. Through all these plans, the goal is threefold. It's to work on policies that encourage active transportation projects, plans that account for spending of existing federal and regional transportation funds toward active transportation projects. And I hope that you all remember earlier when Karen was talking about 2% of transportation funds being directed towards bicycle pedestrian projects. This is what we're speaking of right here, kind of a proof that that is happening at all levels. And then third, we want to secure funding sources that benefit active transportation. Earlier, I spoke about the Active Transportation Guide, the Active Communities Guide, sorry, and the Active People Healthy Nation Initiative. Well, fortunately, in both, the evidence-based recommendations for increasing 27 million people to become physically active are the same, and they're listed here. What we need to see happen is a bicycle pedestrian coalition. The Alaska statewide active transportation plan, fortunately, that already exists and focuses heavily on safety of pedestrians and bicyclists. And in that plan, there are a number of strategies for a coalition to focus on. And I think you heard me speak earlier is we really need a methodology to track how much money is spent on bicycle pedestrian projects. We need a statewide complete street policy in order to make sure that all the streets are created for bicycles, pedestrians, motorists, and persons who have disabilities. And we need to pursue laws that that increase the safety of pedestrians, bicyclists. And those laws can be such things as speed zones. For instance, in Vision Zero, you'll often hear about the high injury network. We have identified certain roads or streets where there seems to be higher incidence of injuries or fatalities, and those are the places or streets or zones that perhaps we need to lower the speed limits. The other thing, as far as a vulnerable user law, is cell phone use or distracted driving. And I don't know how many of the audience is aware that Anchorage passed a cell phone ban in school zones back in 2019. So we're working on that stuff. And a safe passing law, that's another strategy that a coalition could be working on. So all that being said, I'm glad that Julius has come on board. And I really think that the bottom line is that we need the statewide bike ped coalition to really move the needle on safe, active transportation that leads to population with increased physical activity and reduced chronic diseases. And I'm really excited to be working with all of you on this. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dawn.
Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. If you have questions for Dawn, you can private chat to her. And then, like I said, we'll have a chance for some Q&A for all the panelists at the end. So next up, we have the Executive Director of Bike Anchorage, and they have done some amazing work, and especially since she has taken the helm. Please welcome Devora Barrera. Devora.
Hi, everyone. Well, my name is, as Doug said, Deborah Barrera. I am the Director of Bike Anchorage, and today I will talk about Bike Anchorage history and the achievements that we've had along years. So first things first, I'm gonna explain how Bike Anchorage started. In 2008, one of the main founders, Brian Littmans, came back to Anchorage after living in Portland, and he was very experienced about, he used to be a commuter there every day, and this really pushed him to come back and be a commuter here. But he realized that there were no entity or groups focused on bicycle transportation and making our streets safer. There were only groups like recreation groups. So he gathered with a bunch of bicycle commuters and decided to create an advocacy organization that would look after cyclists. And at this exact same time, the city of Anchorage was taking its first steps to create the Anchorage Bike Plan. So they founded Bike Anchorage, and they helped guide the development of the plan. This plan was adopted in 2010, and then they shifted towards advocating for the implementation of the plan. Since the very beginning, Bike Anchorage has been a very strong advocating group, and we currently have an advocacy committee. Someone asked me when this was created, and I think inherently when Bike Anchorage was founded, the advocacy committee was created, and this was because since the beginning, the main goal of Bike Anchorage was just advocating for safety for cyclists. Right now, the advocacy committee works to improve safety and accessibility of cycling within Anchorage in a lot of ways. We work with the municipality of Anchorage. We review projects and submit comments to municipal and state projects that include or sometimes exclude bike infrastructure. We create petitions and we ask people to sign them. We host community events and we do other type of activities. This year, we've been very active and we have submitted a lot of letters with comments and requests to projects like 32nd and 33rd Avenue, the Windy Corner, that you might also know it as the Seward Pathway, that is between Anchorage and Girdwood, the Dowling New Seward Interchange, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And what we usually do is we make a blog post on our website where we put highlights or the summary of the project so people can comprehend them more easily. And then we encourage them to get involved and send comments, to send their own thoughts, their own requests to the authorities, so they know that there's other people besides us that also have requests, or that they also are involved and they do care about infrastructure. So we try to make it very easy for them to get involved. And sometimes just by clicking one of our images, they get redirected to their email, where they will already have a pre-written email, or they will have a bunch of questions that if they answer them, this will shape their email. We also did this year, the beginning of the year when the pandemic started, we sent a request and a proposal to the mayor's office to adopt an open streets policy, which is this is to create more outdoor space for safe recreation. And this is something that other cities like Oakland, New York, Philadelphia, Seattle did. And they just closed down streets or residential streets for through traffic. And unfortunately, this is something we were not able to achieve. But we keep asking, or the pandemic's still here. So we still think that this is a policy that could still be adopted by our mayor's office. In the past, also the advocacy committee has interviewed mayoral candidates, and we help people know what the candidates have in mind towards transportation. So we are planning to do that again for the future mayoral elections that are coming within the next months. And the advocacy committee is made up of everyday people who want to improve cycling in Anchorage. We're always looking for people that is passionate about biking and that share that enthusiasm with others. Everyone is welcome, and we are very welcoming to anyone who wants to share their ideas about how to improve Anchorage. And since this is a volunteering committee, we're very interested in people who have or would like to spearhead and implement new ideas. So now I'm gonna say a little bit achievements that Bike Anchorage has had since it was founded. They did the creation and implementation of the Anchorage Bicycle Plan from 2010. We've been involved in the construction of non-motorized facilities, such as the Spinard Road, where bike lanes would have probably not been included if we didn't advocate for them. We also advocated for the Complete Streets policy, which is now adopted by AMETS. We also advocated for the launch of Vision Zero, which you've heard before in this talk. And now we really want to work for making Vision Zero successful in Anchorage. For those who do not know, Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate traffic fatalities and severe injuries. We have been championing the 32nd and 33rd Avenue project, which if you go to our website, you can go know more about it. But it's basically calming traffic and creating a complete street in Anchorage. And we have attended the Winter Cycling Congress several years. We have attended the National Bike Summit. We raised funds that were matched by Anchorage Park Foundation, and we got bike counters installed in several of the trails around the city. We organized community rides throughout the entire year. We encourage people to consider the bike as a reliable transportation mode despite the weather. And we also installed fat bike signs on the Chugach State Park. And I don't know if you heard about Bike to Work Day, but this is a very big event we throw with the municipality of Anchorage, with the health department. And it's just a local celebration to people that bike to work. And we encourage people to leave their car for this day, but more days of the week as possible. And we also do a bike count. We collect data that at the end plays a significant role when we apply or we receive grants for bicycle improvements for the municipality of Anchorage. And this year we celebrated it on September. And even though the weather was not great and we're in a pandemic, we were able to count over 1,400 cyclists during the event. And we handed out around 140 bike locks for free. We also have events like the Winter Bike Fest or the Commuter Challenge. And we provide resources like tool stations. We have tool stations around the city that have Allen keys, pumps, and tools for cyclists to use. The last fundraising we did was in July, and we have a brand new tool station in the Kincaid, the Jodhpur parking lot. And in September, we hosted a league cycling instructor seminar. So now Anchorage has 8 new cycling instructors. And with this, we're trying to achieve to bring bike education to other communities or other people or other cyclists that have not been able to get access to that before. And finally, we are currently collaborating with the Alaska Native Cultural Charter and the Mountain View Elementary Schools. We are providing bike courses online, bike education courses online for the kids and for their parents, and they can get free helmets, reflective gear, and we send them home. We send home more educational material, and we hope that we really can provide in-person classes next year in more schools and not just these 2.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Devorah. You've been very active and very wonderful, inspiring list of ideas that I got during that section. So now we're going to do our questions and answers. And the first question we're going to do is on this Menti. It's a word cloud. And you can either do the word cloud portion, or if you are having some difficulties there, you can just type it in the chat. But the first question is, what would be the main benefits for a statewide active transportation coalition? So you can see it there. And we're going to give people a minute to think about that. Think about what you heard, these different examples of people coming together in coalitions, making things happen. Bike Anchorage, certainly a fine example that we just heard from. But take a minute and put in a couple ideas there. And then we're going to see what some of the things are and have some discussion about that. So let's fill in this word cloud.
So while we're waiting, I can just mention that just go to open your web browser, go to www.menti.com and use this code up here. And as we enter the different words, we will populate this word cloud, and hopefully we can use this going ahead and share the most pressing issues, or we can use this as a roadmap essentially for future. That's great. I'm seeing a lot of advocacy. I'm seeing a lot of reference to the different recommendations as well. Unity. So Doug, what are your initial thoughts here in seeing this word cloud?
It looks like the big 3 seem to be power, unity, advocacy, and collaboration, and lots of things on the side in terms of funding and political power, but in the center seems to be power and unity.
That's really cool.
Yeah, we have some time. If people would like to unmute and make a comment, we have a few more minutes to discuss this. What are some of the main benefits for a statewide transportation coalition? Lee, are you able to do that? Can people unmute and share a comment if they would like?
So yeah, people should be able to unmute themselves and speak up if they'd like to. or just
Great. Yeah. If anybody has a comment, please just unmute yourself and share. What do you see in the word cloud, or what do you see as some of the main benefits to this?
I guess, while we're waiting for people to think about that or enter those things, I'd like to know from anybody, probably Karen wouldn't have an idea here, however, maybe she does, but I'm curious if we can talk about, besides Bike Anchorage and Sitka Cycling Club, are there, how many other organized groups are there in the state? Is there a group in Fairbanks, where I'm at? Is there a group where else can we find people like on your listserv? Where are they coming from?
So the ones that I've sort of dug around a little bit and looked at different websites, but also looked at social media groups, because there are social media groups and more organized clubs. Fairbanks definitely have a cycling club. Juneau has one. There are multiple mountain bike clubs all around the state as well, from Kodiak to Kenai, to the Kenai Peninsula. Yeah, so there are a lot of people that are organized and are passionate about biking in Alaska. But what I've seen from the DOT's perspective is the benefits of having one group to reach out to in some ways.
Almost the umbrella group.
Yeah. All right. I think we should move over to. We've got almost 30 people that have answered and used the word cloud, and we have a couple of more that have reached out through chat as well. And I think we should move on to the next one, which would be, what is the most pressing policy that the coalition, active transportation coalition, should work with? And as you can see here, there are three. These three top policies are the recommendations from the updated or new policies procedures in the Alaska Active Transportation Plan. So it will just be interesting to see a little bit what people think is the most important topic going ahead.
And Julius, could you do just like a couple sentence on each?
So yeah, I can give a brief explanation. So a 3-foot passing law or a safe passing law would be a law that requires vehicles passing pedestrians or bicyclists to pass with at least 3 feet, give at least 3 feet. A vulnerable user law would be a law that protects the vulnerable road users, essentially, especially in regards to crashes and collisions. And I think the last one, the ban the use of electronic devices while driving, is sort of self-explanatory, but we've seen that a lot of crashes and a lot of fatalities have been involved with, or some fatalities have been involved with when the driver is actually using a handheld device. So banning the use of that.
Is there a significant difference between a 3-foot safe passing law, or is it a subset of a vulnerable user law? Is there a distinction there?
To my understanding, the vulnerable user law would be more of a protective legislative law passing. It wouldn't be focused on the physical passing distance from separating the bicyclist from the car, or the active transportation road user from the law. And the vulnerable user law would be focused more on if this goes to court, what is that law say? And I'm not a specialist at all on these laws, and Karen can probably speak up more about these and know these laws more than I do.
So
Karen, is there anything you want to share on?
Sure. I'd say that with the 3-foot passing law, it's as much an education process as it is a law. So the idea is that you can put signs up on your roads. You got to give bicyclists 3 feet. You can teach it in driver's ed. It's as much that as post-crash saying you obviously didn't give them 3 feet. And for the league, because we're focused on bicycling, we know that the most dangerous time for bicyclists is when you're being passed by a car. And so that's the 3 feet there. I think the vulnerable user law comes into play more for pedestrians as well as bicyclists. And that's sort of a penalty post-crash, but can also be part of the education driver's ed.
And I think, yeah, this is, I'm just reading some of the comments, and I totally agree on that there's a need for a lot of education. This is not, and not only enforcement. Education is a huge part of this, educating both all of the road users. And enforcement is only one of the multiple E's that's sort of required to think of this in a more holistic way.
And it looks like a lot have come in for vulnerable user law. And Karen, tell me if this is right. So if I'm driving and I am found to be at fault and I've caused injury for a vulnerable roadway user, whether it's a biker, walker, anybody who, a policeman giving a ticket, he's on the side of the road out of his car, and I'm found to be at fault, it's often, it's tacking on additional penalties. So it provides additional penalties if the driver's at fault. Is that correct, Karen?
Exactly, that's how I understand it. You know, and each state can write it a little bit differently, but it also is an opportunity to educate law enforcement about the needs for vulnerable road users as well as drivers.
Great. So Julius, have we had most everybody vote?
I think we've had about 16 people vote, so a little bit less than the other one, but if you have any, if you can also type in the chat if you can't access Menti at all. You also have to go forward on Menti. If I'm advancing a slide on Menti, you should advance your slide as well. So I can have it up and see if as we go forward and see if anyone else sort of adds on to this. But I think it's been very useful to see where people are leaning at in some ways.
Great. Well, now we have some time for questions and comments. If you haven't had a chance to vote, please go ahead and do that. But there's a couple that came into the chat. And if you want to, I could start off with that. And then if you want to ask any of our panelists or just ask the group as a whole, there's a lot of knowledge base on this call right now. You can just put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself and share with that. So does anybody have a question they want to start with for any of our panelists?
This is Bruce Kane. Now, you know what? One thing with the Alaska Coalition is we've got Alaska issues. And to me, safety is a lot. We built a nice bicycle trail here in Glen Allen, but it's, you know, it snowed a couple of feet now and it's totally useless. And people are walking out on the road by snow drifts because the bicycle trails are not maintained in the winter. So, and we have winter, you know, about 5 months out of the year. So I think that's an Alaska issue, and you know that goes back to, you know, the advantage of an Alaska coalition. But I don't see any of that here. And you know, some of these policies, I don't think these policies are going to do much good if we don't address our you know, the winter maintenance on these facilities that we spend a lot of money on. Just a comment.
Yeah, let me throw that out to the panel. Does some people have some thoughts on the maintenance? You could have a nice trail, but if it's got drifts and people can't walk and are having to go on the road, and maybe Karen, you might have some insight about other places that get big winters. But does any of our panelists have any thoughts on that?
I'd like to, I'm not a panelist, but I would like to say that in Valdez, when I was living there, I was trying to work with our Department of Transportation because the other issue besides the one that Bruce raises about people being forced to walk into the road, kind of shoulder because the sidewalks aren't passable or the other all active transportation lanes aren't accessible, is as a cyclist, the plowing that happens and the way that the puddles form made it that the safest place or the driest place for me to ride my bike around town was in the middle of the road. Well, that's not helpful. So I was working with Valdez to look at what other like European communities are doing to do a better job of winter maintenance of both sidewalks for getting our kids to school safely and the roads so that those who do have fat bikes and whatnot can travel on the streets and not be down the middle of it or be, obviously just be safer.
And we do see some US cities, I'm not sure if it's Minneapolis or Madison or both, but at least one of them has a rule where they have to clear the sidewalks before they clear the streets. And so they prioritize that active transportation piece first. I will say in general, federal funding doesn't go to the maintenance. It just goes to building the project. So then the funding issue becomes a state or a local issue.
And could I just add to that as well, that it's very important to know who has the right of way on the road as well. It might be city, it might be a state road. I can share the DOT's winter road maintenance priority map, which it's a GIS map where they have different priority levels. So you can see if your road that you're using is a state road or a muni road so I'll share that in the chat and hope that that we can come to some sort of conclusion on this.
Well,
I guess
what we were talking about too in Valdez is the use of, and I know the mag chloride lobby seems to be very effective, but like using mag chloride has some disadvantages with the way the ice forms and stuff, at least in Valdez, maybe elsewhere. And not to mention the fact of what it does to your bike gears and, the metal on your bikes and whatnot. And there are, again, alternatives being used elsewhere that are as effective, if not more so, than mag chloride. Again, the whole winter issue is a separate measure that we'll probably get to. I think we have lower hanging fruit elsewhere, but Bruce raised a great point that's definitely been on my radar as somebody who likes to bike and walk year round. But I'm just piping up because it struck a nerve with me.
Yeah, Jen, it's not just a winter issue. That maintenance is a big deal because in the summer, the bike trails go across driveways and people will drag the gravel out onto the bike trail, and pretty soon there's gravel all over the bike trail and people are back out in the road again. And all they do is run a brush down there, and DOT won't do it. It's just not on their list. So that's something that should be put into the policy. I don't see it anywhere near here, just maintenance of facilities given a priority. Because you build them, everybody feels good about it, but then they're not any good if you don't just do simple maintenance.
And Don, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did. When I was working with Bike Anchorage years ago, this was a big problem in Anchorage with all the snow on the trails. And I remember Bike Anchorage, we were pretty outspoken, and we had the telephone numbers for DOT, both the state and the municipality of Anchorage, on our website. And we shared that number pretty aggressively during the winter time, and we had a lot of really great response with that. DOT actually, by the time I made it to work in the morning, when I was on my way back, they would have plowed the sidewalks. So I think it's like having that group voice. And again, we're talking about a coalition, a group of people. The squeaky wheel does get heard. And we saw some great response with that. So a group of people reaching out, calling them, saying, hey, the sidewalk is blocked again. I think that that's the best tool. And, you know, keeping at it for a while until it becomes part of their habits that always circle back on those trails, I think is the most effective tool.
And that'll be a segue. We'll do another round of questions, but I wanted to mention this, and I'll mention at the end, that if you're interested in a statewide coalition and seeing the power of a unified voice and how to be that squeaky wheel, the plan is for a coalition meeting as a kickoff on November the 12th at 1:30. So if you're interested in that, please let Dawn know, and we can send out a link for a virtual meeting there as kind of a kickoff to this, because as you heard from Karen, we're number 39 in the nation, and I think everybody on this call would like to see us go up in that number, but more importantly, just be safer and have more people getting physical activity. So are there other questions? We have a little bit of time left. We've talked about maintenance. Does anybody else want to unmute and ask a question for all of the panel or all of the people on the call?
Can I say something regarding the last question?
Yeah, please.
So we do have those numbers in our website, and I am checking the link that Julius shared about the winter road maintenance priority map from the state, and I'm also checking the Anchorage Street maintenance from the Muni. And I think the main problem we found, and that others have told us, is that it's very hard to know who's supposed to do the maintenance, if it's the Muni or the state. So then even if you have the numbers, and if you don't know, you do spend quite a important amount of time calling one place and another one, because they keep redirecting you, or they keep telling you it's not their job. So maybe we finding a way to tell people, or to have a map where you can see which roads or who's supposed to maintain it, would be a good resource for people to report more accurately.
Thank you for that clarification. And maybe people, as a follow-up, can check out the Bike Anchorage website. I think JWA has a hand up.
I do, and sorry for that. It's Wayne Adderhold. I couldn't change the name. But anyway,
That's okay.
Yeah, a few comments, not questions so much, but I appreciate this panel. I'm in Homer, 71 years old, a utilitarian cyclist. I bike or walk almost everywhere. I live right in the middle of town, so active transportation is definitely my thing. I put myself through LCI training, League Cycling Instructor training in 2015, went back east and took the class just so I could learn to be a better on-street cyclist, because here's the reality. Separated facilities are neat. We've got the Homer Spit Trail, which gets lots of use. But the reality, particularly for towns like Homer, which is not a government town site, a lot of people aren't aware of this, but like Anchorage is a government town site, Seward is, other towns, probably Kenai, when they were laid out, they've got 100-foot rights of way. Towns like Homer were not. And so it's a lot of the roads around here are just 50 feet right of way. If there is a right of way, some of them don't even have a right of way. So the point of this is that it takes a long time to get any kind of, even a sidewalk. It took 20 years to get a sidewalk up Bartlett Street to the hospital. So the bottom line reality is you have to ride in the road. And that means doing it safely. And a big part of the problem is getting motorists tuned into this, because the reality is, and a lot of them don't know this, is that, you know, bicycles do have a right to be in the road. One of the first things you learn with the league is, you know, it was the league was originally formed in 1890, before there was even cars. And so education is a big part of it, both for the bicyclists and the motorists. And there's probably lots of times through my LCI training, I should be taking the lane. I'm very judicious about that. If I've got enough room, then I will just ride near the shoulder. But bad habits can get formed really easily too. And the DOT years ago on Ocean Drive put a wide shoulder on one side of the road, and that became the bike walking lane. So that meant half the time people are going in the wrong direction. And unlearning that is really hard, because now there's a wide enough shoulder on both sides, and people still ride on the side where DOT had it marked. So marking the things the wrong way is a terrible thing, because people start thinking that's where they're supposed to be. I could go on about a lot of things. The city is really bad about that too. They'll give you maybe a 2-footer on one side, and they put the bike pedestrian markings on there, and it just drives me nuts, because you'll have a bike riding down the wrong direction now, which is the number one accident producer. So that's a big deal. And so really, in reality, in Homer, I consider almost every road to be a sharo, where it's a shared road. And I think that's our reality for a long time, is that not just in Homer, but in most of Alaska, including some of the main roads that are DOT roads, that the road has to be shared. So thanks for listening to me.
Can I jump in? This is Carla Hart. I bicycle tour a lot. I don't bike in Juneau because it does not seem safe. But I bike toured a lot. I've taken the league training. About 10 years ago, I went to the Netherlands to bicycle tour, specifically because I wanted to see their built infrastructure. And it's amazing, but what I came away with was a real passion for getting a vulnerable roadway user law, because I realized that what makes you so safe bicycling there is the behavior of the motor vehicles, and that they truly yield, and that they are trained, and that they are looking out for bicyclists. And as well, in Asia and other places I've biked, I'm so impressed that there are places with cultures that look out for people regardless of the infrastructure. And there are places like Australia and the United States that are horribly dangerous, no matter how good our infrastructure might be in places. So I am all for the vulnerable roadway user and would love to work on it.
Great, thank you for sharing that. I think at that November 12th kickoff meeting for the coalition, that's going to be discussed, because Julius, correct me if I'm wrong, but was that the vulnerable roadway the top vote getter so far in the polling?
You're correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so important discussion there. Other thoughts on the coalition meeting that's coming up, vulnerable roadway user, anything on your mind, questions for panelists, or even just a comment?
I want to share that when I was living in Mexico, I was working at the municipality transportation department, and we came up with this idea that we got support, and then it became a municipality law, and now it's a whole program. But drivers that get a ticket because they park on bike or pet facilities, or other type of tickets, they would be able to get a 50% discount on the ticket if they had attended a 4-hour like seminar course, where they would know about bike, pet facilities, and people with disabilities. So this was very impactful, because at the beginning, drivers would come very upset, and at the end, most of them would leave with a truth understanding of how there are more vulnerable users in them. So it changed their minds. This could be maybe something we could dream of, or dream for the future for our drivers, or just a course as part of getting a driver license. I can't hear you.
This is Dawn, and I like that we're spending a lot of time talking about bicycle advocacy. One of the things that I feel really passionate about is like recognizing it's the pedestrians that are dying out there, and we really have to concentrate on that group of people. For some reason, they don't have an advocacy group. We're all pedestrians, and we all have the potential of having something terrible and horrible happen. So I really I really want this advocacy group to speak out for that population that does not have a voice. And, you know, the biggest population, as we know, are the homeless. Homeless people are dying in absurd numbers. And so far, you know, even though I'm working on Vision Zero, I still feel handicapped about being able to do something. So I really hope that this group could coalesce and really push the agenda on that. And it's stuff that is just so simple. It's depressing, just lowering the speed limit on some of these roads. And they do it absolutely everywhere around the state. School zones have lower speed limits. If you drive through Talkeetna, Houston, you go through a number of little communities and the speed limits are slowed down. And to have DOT pushing back and saying that we can't lower the speed limit because people might be late to work, I hope that this would be the group who would speak up against that audacity, actually. So this is one of the things about a bicycle pedestrian advocacy group that I really think has some foundation for success.
Thanks for sharing that, Donna. We have about 3 more minutes left. We'll do one last maybe question or comment. I think Ellie Carpenter, did you have your hand up? Did you have something you wanted to share as we start to close up the session?
Yeah. Hi. I'm a 12-year-old who lives in Juneau, and the biking community is really big in Juneau. And something big that's happened more than a few times is children. They're a big part of the biking community all over Alaska, I think. And educating children from the ages of 5, like my little brother, to the ages of until like the ages of 17, because teenagers sometimes don't care about the rules. And just educating children about biking rules and things like that. Like personally, I was out on a bike trip with a lot of my friends, and they were driving on the wrong, biking on the wrong side, like was mentioned earlier. And we didn't even realize it until a little bit later. And then, you know, it was something bad could have happened in that amount of time. So how this is for anybody who is involved or knows something about it. Is there any plan to educate children or even children pedestrians on like school program to make sure that no child gets harmed?
It's a great question. Does anybody on the panel want to field that?
So this is Karen. I'll just give some examples of outside of Alaska. We are seeing places from Washington, D.C. to Mississippi start making bicycle education part of the physical education in schools. So the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or sometimes the city itself, will buy a fleet of bikes for either 2nd graders or 4th graders to give them some basic bicycling skills.
And that might be something else a coalition could look at, how to do that advocacy piece to get bike ed and pedestrian safety in schools. So on that note, it's 2:59. I'll make the summary comments. I'll turn over to Lee if she has anything else to add. So the coalition meeting, November 12th, 1:30 to, I think, 2:30, but Dawn, I think, had her email in the chat. And so if you're interested in that, you want to get in on this very first meeting and start to look at how we can do some advocacy statewide, please come. It's November the 12th, 1:30. And thanks to all of the panelists. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. We are at just about 3 o'clock. It was great to be the moderator. I apologize. Sometimes I was talking and my mute was off, but hopefully it's on right now. But thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for making our state healthier. And Lee, do you have any final comments to end us up today?
Doug, this is Bruce. Can I make one comment here? I think we saw a big resource here that we might not want to capture, and that's some kind of a youth council And I would certainly encourage Ellie to attend that meeting and any of your friends. And so I think we should be encouraging our youth and developing our youth leadership on this as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. And Lee, any final thoughts from your end?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like we have some energy around coming together around some of these issues. It really feels like it in this call. Ellie, I would say, has been involved with Confluence for a couple years now, and I hope she'll agree to be one of our advisors. We don't even want a youth council. We just want to give her the same voice as the rest of our advisors. No pressure, Ellie. Yeah, we're going to host. We will also be getting the information out via Alaska Outdoor Alliance Facebook, Instagram, our email newsletter blast, our events on our webpage to try and get the word out about this follow-up meeting on November 12th, kind of an organizing meeting. You know, we're sort of well positioned to be an umbrella group. We've already been doing it for several other issues. We've got some nice relationships with some of our legislators already. Those of you in the Anchorage Bowl might see the work we've been doing on the Turnagain Pass plowing initiative, which is a vulnerable users issue in its own right. But anyway, I'm excited to feel this energy, and I really think that we also know that we have at least one legislator who is interested in filing like a safe routes kind of bill or something, or is interested in working with us on next legislative session. I've already previewed that we want to do something. And so she is open to that. And she's one of our senators. And so that would be pretty cool. But again, we'll get the word out with Don about the meeting on the 12th. I'm hope, and please share the word far and wide. We'll do it on Zoom because that's what we do now. And before then, I also want to encourage those of you on the call to come back to our final session of Confluence, which is tomorrow, starting at 9. We will have former Governor Tony Knowles, whose name is synonymous with trails, talking about trails and infrastructure funding. We have Representative Garen Tarr and New Mexico Representative Angelica Rubio will be talking about the idea of an outdoor equity fund to get resources to underserved communities for outdoor recreation activities and workforce development, those types of issues. My policy friend from REI Co-op, Mark Baraika, will be joining us to share a national outlook. And Turnagain Arm will come up again, snow machines, so winter recreation and investment and the national, it's going to be a very exciting policy day. And, you know, and this transportation conversation also fits into that as we try to decide our policy priorities as an industry going forward next year. So that starts tomorrow at 9. You know, we'll get more word out on Facebook and elsewhere about that. And we hope you'll join us again. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. I really felt a lot of energy in this session. Thank you to our panelists for their time and sharing their knowledge and experience. And we will see you tomorrow. Thank you. Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
My pleasure. I think the panelists.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I think the panelists may stay on to debrief for just a minute, but thanks everybody else for coming, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you.